Council as we talk about the responses that we filed this morning. We're going to really give you information about that and why we feel so strongly about our litigation. But a few things I want to say before that. Today is June 2nd, and obviously just yesterday this whole Greenwood Cultural Center was jam-packed with dignitaries, elected officials, corporate leaders, and obviously the President of the United States. People from all around the nation were here in Tulsa dealing with, discussing the centennial and what we can do to move forward. And many of those people have left Tulsa and they're going back to their respective locations. But the work continues. The hard work continues. And we are excited that the President was here, that he made some statements. But we all know that there's a lot of work to be done, and we need specifics to create the type of environment that we can get Greenwood back where it was and where it should be. And that's the work of this litigation. That's the work of this powerful legal team that you see standing in front of you. And we are excited that we have this opportunity to finally, hopefully, for the first time in the Oklahoma history, for a case to move forward and for the survivors and the descendants of the massacre to finally have an opportunity to prove their case in court. In 100 years, in over 100 cases, that has never occurred. Why is that so important? Well, just last night, we released new data, new research with the Justice for Greenwood Foundation and the New School led by Dr. Derek Hamilton released some devastating new numbers. For example, right here in Tulsa today, the median net wealth of white Tulsans is $145,000. The median wealth for black Tulsans is only $8,000. It's more than 6 times the wealth disparity than the nationwide average. This is what we're talking about. This is why museums, this is why plaques, this is why trees, this is why murals, all of that is good. But we must eradicate the wealth gap. We must eradicate the health gap, where we have black Tulsans living 11 to 14 years less than white Tulsans. In some area codes, like the area code I grew up in, 74106, it's almost 20 years less than white Tulsans. We're talking about home ownership, where black Tulsans own our homes almost 2 times less than white Tulsans. And the list goes on and on and on. And for 100 years, we've waited for justice. And for 100 years, we've received empty promises that justice would be done. And even as I stand here today, some of you heard the city of Tulsa saying that they're going to give us more empty rhetoric, more empty resolutions, more empty commissions. Our people have been clear. Our survivors and our descendants even told the President yesterday, we don't need any more studies. We don't need any more commissions. We don't need any more meetings. We need reparations. We need reparations today. We need reparations now. And that is what this lawsuit is about. The beauty of it, and you're going to hear from these very powerful legal minds, is that it is a public nuisance case that is well understood and been used in Oklahoma for 100 years. We have a very strong case. Obviously, we're not the judge. The judge will make the decision if we can move forward, but we fully believe, firmly believe, 100% believe that we should be able to move forward this case and finally show what it would actually take to abate this nuisance. So you're going to hear from everyone up here. The first person is my good friend Eric Miller, who was actually a part of the litigation in the early 2000s when all these people you see on the wall here were still alive. And they were still our living clients. And all these people on this wall are now deceased. And they all died without justice. It's one of the reasons we wanted to be in this room today, because we have 3 living survivors. And we're going to do everything we can in our power to make sure they do not die without justice. So Professor Eric Miller from Loyola Marymount will be your first speaker after me.
Thank you very much, Damario. Again, I'm Professor Eric Miller from Loyola Marymount University. So, in Dred Scott versus Sandford, the infamous slavery case decided in 1857, Chief Justice Tawney stated that black people, quote, had for more than a century been regarded as beings of an inferior order and altogether unfit to associate with the white race, either in social or political relations, and so far inferior that they had no rights which the white man was bound to respect, end quote. Right here in Tulsa, Oklahoma, the defendants in this litigation, which include the city of Tulsa and its Chamber of Commerce, but also the state of Oklahoma as well, have acted as if Justice Tawney's pronouncement were still the law of the land, and have treated the people of Greenwood and North Tulsa, along with the descendants of the Tulsa Race Massacre, as second-class citizens not worthy of respect or rights. However, the people of Greenwood and North Tulsa will not be disrespected. The people of Greenwood and North Tulsa will have their rights to live as equal citizens in neighborhoods and communities that have all the features and amenities that allow them to determine for themselves how their lives are to grow and to flourish. When I got the call almost 2 years ago from attorney Damario Solomon-Simmons to join in this latest fight for justice for the people of Greenwood and North Tulsa, I was heartened to hear that this was a lawsuit whose innovative legal ideas were developed in Tulsa by Damario along with his team of Spencer Bryan and Stephen Terrell. For 18 months, we worked diligently developing these legal claims. We brought on board invaluable legal assistance from Lashandra Peoples-Johnson and Cordell Cephas to broaden and deepen our Tulsa-based and Tulsa-strong legal team, along with help from Maynard Henry and myself, and a huge amount of help from numerous people working behind the scenes here in Tulsa. These are people with deep connections to the neighborhood and community they represent, many of them descendants themselves. And of course, we've been joined and bolstered and strengthened in recent months by the SRZ law firm, who have taken up the challenge of filing our second complaint and these motions to rebutting these motions to dismiss, as you're about to hear. Over the past 18 months, we spent countless hours researching and drafting the first complaint, which we filed in 2020. I think I can say that I've read every single book on the Tulsa Race Massacre, at least the factual ones, ever written. Although my recent experience down here has convinced me that in the coming weeks and months, there's a few more that I'm going to have to add to my reading list. What I've learned reading the books, speaking to the survivors and descendants, and just walking around Greenwood is the depth of the continuing harm that still impacts this community. We've heard a lot about that from Damario, but it's sometimes been hard to convince people of the economic, cultural, and psychological trauma that still haunts Greenwood and North Tulsa. Communities around the country who are happy to commemorate their own culture's trauma, who tell their own tales of devastation, exodus, and famine, inexplicably find it hard to believe that African Americans suffered in this way. That is why this lawsuit is so important, because it charts the ongoing links between the cultural, physical, economic, and psychic violence of 1921 and the cultural, physical, economic, and psychic violence of 2021. What is truly innovative about these lawsuits was not the nature of the legal claim, but the fact that we are demanding that the same law that has been applied to others is applied to the African American survivors and descendants of Greenwood and North Tulsa. Yesterday, the President spoke the truth and justice of our claims. Today, we hope the courts will recognize that truth and give us that justice, because only then can Greenwood and North Tulsa itself live in truth and justice with equal rights and respect for all its citizens and the great diaspora of descendants who look to this place as a beacon of hope and seek to call it home once again.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Eric. The next part of our legal team that you're going to hear from is a person that's become a very good friend. All these folks on this stage are standing beside me. We've come very close because, as Eric stated, we've been working on this for such a long time. We meet weekly, and it's just been a great experience to see people just dive in unselfishly and say this is something that is important and important to us as an organization, but also important as people. You know, I've been practicing law for 17 years. I've dealt with a lot of lawyers, and as lawyers, we have big egos and lots of opinions. Everybody wants to talk, but the beauty of this project is that people have come together and said we're all focused on these survivors and descendants. And part of that, from the SRZ standpoint, is this young man standing next to me, Michael Swartz, who is one of the top commercial litigators in the entire world, not the nation, in the entire world. And he's come in and brought his team in, and they have just melded with us, and they care so much. They've been on ground here. They wanted to come see. They didn't have to do this. And they've spent, and I'm sure Michael will talk more about it, but I want to say how thankful we are. They've spent millions of dollars in time working on this case. They have lots of attorneys, and Michael's going to talk about it. But that's why we feel so confident, because we finally, for the first time, we have the firepower, we have the resources for the long haul. So, Michael, I'm so glad you're here. I appreciate you and your firm so much, and I'm looking forward to your comments.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. I'm Michael Swartz. I'm co-chair of the Schulte Roth and Zabel Litigation Department. We are a New York-based firm with over 300 lawyers in Washington, New York, and London. We have a strong history of social justice activism, and we felt it was particularly important to use our law degrees, our privilege of being lawyers, to help and contribute to lifting Black Americans and help society seek access to justice. We believe that it's important for the future of racial justice litigation for large law firms like ours to assist in cases like these to seek change. As President Biden said in this building yesterday, if you lift one person up, you lift everyone up, and we strongly, strongly believe that. I want to talk a minute about how we got involved. It was a relationship that grew and blossomed over time. We are doing this on a pro bono basis. We're contributing our time to the community, and a few months ago, we received a call from Brian Stevenson of Equal Justice Initiative, who was also a pro bono client of the firm, and he said that there was a group in Tulsa seeking help with regard to the misappropriation of images that had been used from the massacre for fundraising purposes and for commercial purposes, and could we lend our expertise in intellectual property issues to the cause? We said not only would we be happy to do that, we also asked if there was anything else we could do. And the rest is history. We really got involved. And I'll say as a note, I want to talk a little bit about our involvement, but I first thought about this as helping out the Tulsa community, the African American community in Tulsa, but that's not it. It's helping out my community. It's helping out America and all Americans and humans. So this case has taught me a lot. Working with Damario and his team has taught me a lot. This has been an amazing experience. I want to briefly talk about my firm's involvement. In this case, we have 12 lawyers from my firm alone, and we heard from Eric about the many other lawyers who've been involved as well. In total, we have 30 lawyers and 20 business staff from my firm who have been working on not only this litigation, but also with Justice for Greenwood. We worked on this litigation. We have brought a number of Public Records Act cases, trying to get to the bottom of who perpetrated these crimes, what happened, and we have filed, I don't know the number, but a large number of Public Records Act cases at this point in time. We have been assisting in identifying the insurance companies who denied the Greenwood community the recovery on their claims that prevented them from rebuilding their community. We're helping identify the banks, and we've helped identify the banks who refused the Black citizens of Tulsa from being able to take out their deposits because they didn't have their identification that had been destroyed in the massacre. We have helped the survivors and others with their trust and estate plannings and helping them with their wills. We have helped Justice for Greenwood in corporate governance and in fundraising, and our business staff has helped with the Senate outreach. So we are, as a firm, very committed to this project, and we could not be happier. At this point in time, and I think this is only the beginning, I hope this is only the beginning, we've contributed 3,000 hours of time, lawyer time, to this project, and that translates to 2.5 million in legal services that we've donated to this community. And again, our community, but for this project. Thank you. With regard to this case, I just want to briefly touch on why we needed such a big team in terms of the numbers. There are, excuse me, I knew that was going to happen. There are 8 defendants in this case, and together they filed 7 separate motions to dismiss. There were 7 different sets of legal papers we had to respond to within a 60-day period. And those briefs totaled 117 pages. And so it took an army of lawyers to put together the complex legal arguments that Randall Adams and Mackenzie Haynes from my firm will describe in a little more detail. But I just want to say from my perspective, from a top line level, I absolutely second what Damario said. We are confident, and again, it is for the judge to decide, but we are confident that we should prevail in defeating these motions to dismiss. We should have an opportunity to take discovery, to get to the bottom of what happened here, and to prove our claims in court. And we look forward to that opportunity. And when we get that opportunity, we intend to bring the full resources of our firm to bear on getting to the bottom of the truth and proving our case. And so with that, I will turn it over to Randall Adams or Mackenzie Haynes to talk about the details of the case in a little more granularity.
Thank you, Michael. I'm a little short, so let me make sure you all can hear me. Oh, geez. Sorry about that. Thank you. So as Michael said, my name is Mackenzie Haynes, and I am an attorney with Schulte Roth. It has been a pleasure to work with you, Damario, and your team. It has been a pleasure to represent the survivors and descendants of this litigation. And one thing I will say is our survivors were victims and witnesses to the worst act of domestic terrorism that this country has ever seen. They're witnesses to murder, to arson, to other heinous crimes. And because, of course, the United States doesn't have a domestic terrorism statute, which is a big problem, and the state of Oklahoma, the city of Tulsa has yet to call a grand jury to investigate the crimes in this case, we are in a unique position to try to find a legal remedy that works. And we are blessed to be in Tulsa, to be in Oklahoma, where there is a unique public nuisance statute, which will give us the opportunity to seek justice. So for 100 years, survivors and descendants have tried and tried again to seek access to justice in the courts, and they have been denied repeatedly. In 2003, as Eric talked about briefly and Damario talked about briefly, a federal case was filed and the court shot it down. They said it was too late. They said, sorry, your claims, we can't hear them. We're not going to equitably toll the statute. It doesn't matter that you have not obtained justice. We're just going to let this pass. And that's not okay. So because we are in Oklahoma, we are in Tulsa, we have a public nuisance statute that will allow for a remedy. And the public nuisance statute here is unique. It is broad. As Michael mentioned, the state of Oklahoma, the city of Tulsa, they provided us with a test case in the opioid litigation. And we plan to use, and we have used in our responses, the exact methodology and principles that the state used in their case. So let me talk about why we think this is a public nuisance. And Damario talked about it a little bit. On May 31st, 1921, the white mobs came in and they murdered, they destroyed, they killed, they looted, they rioted, and a public nuisance was created. After that moment, it continued and continued and continues to this day. We believe that the massacre ignited the nuisance that exists today in Tulsa, specifically North Tulsa, and all of the policies and practices that have been implemented by the defendants have elevated and exacerbated the public nuisance. For example, urban renewal. These policies pushed Black people out of their homes. It made them poorer than their white neighbors. A highway was constructed right over there, cutting North Tulsa away from South Tulsa, taking resources, opportunity. The health disparities that have continued as a result. There's no hospital, by the way, as all of you know, I'm sure, in North Tulsa. That was, I think, it's probably the most profound thing that I recall Damario talking about, was just that there's no hospital in this vicinity. But there was in 1921, and it has not been rebuilt. And that is a nuisance. There's so many other things that have happened, the educational disparities, all of these things are part of the public nuisance that continues today. And because we have a test case, because we have the state and the city of Tulsa who have demonstrated that acts such as these, societal injustices, that they can be remedied through the statute, we believe that we are right on the law in order to equate the societal injustice of the massacre and its continuing harm to this case. Another claim that we have is our unjust enrichment claim. And we believe that we are absolutely right on the law on this. As you can see behind us today, not in this building, but there's a new museum coming up. And the names and the stories and the images of all of these descendants and survivors and their stories are being told, and the people who have suffered are not reaping any of the benefits as a result. There is cultural tourism that is being created in Tulsa, and that's wrong. And people should be compensated if their stories and their images and their likenesses are going to be used without their permission. Particularly, it's particularly egregious. And so we are asking for our defendants to stop, to give up all of the resources that they have achieved or received as a result of using the likenesses and names and images of survivors and descendants, and giving it back to the people who it belongs to. And so let me also close with this and just tell you what we're asking for. You know, our defendants claim that we are asking to cure society of racism in our claims. It's absurd. We all know that that's not something that's easily overcome, and we're not asking for that. What we're asking for is for the nuisance to be abated.
Right.
Simple as that. The nuisance is specific here in Tulsa. It is targeted to Tulsa. It is related to the massacre that happened in Tulsa. And we want the remedy to be here for the folks that deserve it. We want a victims' compensation fund. We want the survivors and the descendants to have the opportunity to be compensated for the harm that they have endured for the last 100 years and continue to endure. As I mentioned before, we want a hospital built in North Tulsa. We want educational resources provided back to the community. We want taxes to, the folks who have experienced this in the community, the Black Tulsans who live and endure the continuing harm, to not have to pay any more state and local taxes because they have been denied justice for so long. Their economic justice has been taken from them, and we believe that it is only fair to not have them have to spend their resources to give it back to the state or the city or the county that has taken so much from them. So I will close just with this. Again, it's been an honor to be a part of this litigation. We believe we are right on the law, and we're hoping for our day in court. Randall? Ooh, thank you.
Thanks, Mackenzie. My name is Randall Adams. I'm a special counsel at Schulte, Roth & Zabel in New York. I'll echo what Mackenzie said. It's been an absolute pleasure and an honor to work with Damario and his team. It's an absolute pleasure and honor to be here in Tulsa for the events of this weekend. I'm going to talk a little bit about where we are right now in the case and in the motions that are pending before the court and our responses to those motions. So on March 12th of this year, all of our defendants filed motions to dismiss our case. A motion to dismiss basically is asking the judge to say, this case stops right now. They don't even get a trial, they don't get a hearing, they don't get a motion for summary judgment, we don't need evidence. This case just doesn't work from the jump. We are opposing that motion, obviously, and we should win those motions. Here in Oklahoma, it's a notice pleading jurisdiction, which means that our burden right now is to put defendants on notice of the claims against them, then we go into discovery, then we have a trial. The defendants are on notice of the claims against them. They cannot claim right now not to know what conduct is at issue, not to know what they're supposed to defend. They know that. It's very clear in the extensive amended petition that was filed, and we should win these motions. The day in court is a really important idea here. As Mackenzie mentioned, the state of Oklahoma has used the very same statute, the very same legal theory in a landmark lawsuit against dozens of pharmaceutical companies, claiming that a statewide, decades-long opioid addiction crisis is a public nuisance that needs to be abated. It's the same theory. We modeled our case off of that. And you know what the state got? The state got a 33-day trial with 42 witnesses and 800 exhibits. They got a chance to prove their case in court. We're asking the court for the same opportunity. We want a trial, we want to call witnesses, we'll bring experts in. As Michael mentioned, we're going to bring the full power of our firm and all of our co-counsel to that trial. And we want a chance to prove to our court and to Tulsa and to the United States, this is a public nuisance, this is how it needs to be abated. And by the way, the state won that trial. It's not just that they had a trial, they won that trial. We're confident we're going to win that trial too, and on the motions before the court, we should absolutely get our trial. What's really interesting is, obviously, how can the state argue that this isn't a public nuisance when they just made the same arguments in a trial that happened 18 months ago? Well, what the defendants have done is they've enlisted the Chamber of Commerce, which is the only non-government defendant in our case, to make all of these arguments for them. But all of these arguments have already been rejected in the opioid litigation. For example, the Chamber of Commerce argues that to have a public nuisance, it can only be about property. It can only be about backyards and fences and things like that. The state the defendants in the state's opioid case made the exact same argument, and it was rejected there. It should get rejected here. Similarly, the chamber argues that the nuisance statute it's too vague, no one understands what it means, it's so vague that it's unconstitutional. The pharmaceutical company defendants made the same argument in the opioid litigations, and that argument was rejected. All of those arguments should be rejected here. These motions should be denied for the reasons in our opposition briefs. There's a few other arguments I'll talk about. For example, the defendants are claiming that this case was brought too late, and so they're using a theory called latches. But in Oklahoma, under this very specific special public nuisance law, a public nuisance is a vindication of a public right. There is no statute of limitations. It says specifically in the statute, you are never too late to bring this case as long as the nuisance is ongoing. There is no latches issue here. They're also arguing that we are supposed to have brought the case through something called the Governmental Tort Claims Act. That also doesn't apply to this case. We extensively go through this in all of our oppositions. We're bringing a case for an equitable remedy. We're not seeking actual money damages as that's defined in the law. And so we didn't have to go through the Government Tort Claims Act. For all of those reasons, these motions should be denied. And again, what we're asking for at this stage is just for our clients who include the last 3 remaining survivors to have their day in court, just like the state did in the opioid litigations, and we should get that. Thank you.
Thank you, Randall. All right, so we have a few people that's come in, and we got another speaker that I want to introduce. I definitely want to recognize my sister, my partner in this fight, someone who is on the front lines and has just been here in Tulsa and has made such a difference in our community, who put on the Black Wall Street Legacy Festival. She's the executive director, the founder and executive director of the Terrence Crutcher Foundation. And without her, we wouldn't be here today. And that's obviously, I'm talking about Dr. Tiffany Crutcher, who does not have a voice this morning. But give it up for Dr. Tiffany Crutcher. We stand together, and we have, with great pride and honor, been able to work together on these initiatives. So many in this city have tried to divide us. They've tried to, they've slandered us. They've attacked us. But we stand strong and we stand together to see victory for our community and our people. And another reason why we know we're going to see victory is this woman right here, Sarah Salfinelli, who is she's my, no, I think Angela Ross said she ride or die. And you don't normally say that with a high-powered New York attorney, but we say that with great pride. And she's a ride or die, and she's been in here fighting with us. She's co-counsel on the case, but she's also my lawyer as the corporate lawyer of the Justice for Greenwood Foundation. So, Sarah, do what you do.
I wasn't going to speak, but microphone. So I would just echo what my colleagues, Michael and Randall and Mackenzie have said. It's a great honor. We are so grateful and appreciative, Dr. Crutcher, Damario, to be given the opportunity to represent the survivors and descendants, to work with the Greenwood community to access justice. And as we've been here, we've met some of our clients, we've met with many descendants, and a descendant came up and said to me, I'm in my 70s, I don't think I'll see justice, but I hope it comes someday. And I said, what are you talking about? This is not over. We are here. If you just heard these claims in this lawsuit, I've been watching, there's been so much news coverage this past week, and a lot of it has said reparations, maybe Congress will do something, maybe the city council will do something. We're doing something. The community is doing something.
That's right.
We're not waiting. It is June 2nd. I don't know what will happen with the news coverage. It may be gone, but we will be here. Schulte, Roth, and Szabo's here, our co-counsel, this legal team. We're not going anywhere. As we've made clear, we are just getting started. So it has been a great honor, and we look forward to victory together and bringing justice to Greenwood and to communities everywhere.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Damario.
I definitely want to acknowledge some folks that could not be here today. Eric talked about Spencer, Brian, and Stephen Terrell, who are actual classmates of mine from middle school and high school. We do a lot of cases together, and they have been with me on this journey from the very beginning. He also talked about some young lawyers that we brought on. Because see, when I was coming, I was a young lawyer, I was a law student when I met Eric, in fact, and then became a baby lawyer working with Eric and Johnny Cochran and Professor Charles Ogletree. And it's important for us to bring on that next generation of lawyers in this fight. And Cordell Cephas and LaShandra Peoples-Johnson, they have been outstanding to work with. Maynard Henry, who's out of Virginia, a longtime civil rights attorney who couldn't be here today. And then people behind the scenes, like Greta that's here, and Jerica, and Chad, and Yolantrice, and Jordan, and DJ. These are people that have been working tirelessly to make this happen. And of course, I have to mention my beautiful, talented, marvelous wife, Mia Fleming, who has to be with me 24 hours a day, which is a difficult task. I also want to thank, Michael mentioned all the lawyers at SRZ who were involved, but I definitely want to highlight one. The firm is Schulte, Roth, Zabel, and Bill Zabel, who's one of the founding members of the firm. He's 82 years old. He's a civil rights icon. Some of you are familiar with the Levin versus Virginia case, which allowed interracial marriages. Bill Zabel wrote the brief, and he's an uber successful lawyer, and he is passionate about justice for Greenwood. You know, we had a conference call a couple of weeks ago, and it was a long conference call, and Bill Zabel stayed on the call the whole time, 2.5 hours. And this is a guy on video. This is a guy that could be doing anything in the world that he wants to do. And he called me and he said, Damario, you're not utilizing me enough. I want to make this happen. And so I just want to tell Bill we thank him and thank his firm. I definitely also want to recognize something that miraculous that happened on the 31st, something that had never happened in 100 years of this issue. The National Guard apologized for their role in the destruction of Greenwood. Just in September of 2020, when we filed our case, the National Guard came out and said, hey, we didn't have anything to do with it. If it wasn't for us, it would have been worse. But on May 31st, because of this litigation, because of the work that this team and this community has done, the National Guard showed up, said, we're sorry, we didn't do our jobs, we should have done better, and we're sorry about it. And we want to acknowledge the National Guard for saying that, and we also put that in their brief. So the judge knows that they admitted that. We also want to acknowledge that we saw that the city of Tulsa, Mayor Bynum, said, yeah, the city of Tulsa, you know, we shouldn't have done this, but we want to make it clear. It was not a full-throated acknowledgement that needs to happen. He's still talking about what we can't be responsible for what criminals did 100 years ago. These people, they did criminal acts, but they were acting under the authority and the direction of the city. They were acting within the scope of the employment of the city. So they were criminals, but legally, they were doing what they were told by the city. So he's still trying to give the city cover. They have no cover. They are responsible. We will not accept any empty resolutions. We will not accept any empty rhetoric, empty promises. We need to see justice with this litigation and the other cases that Michael talked about. And we have other strategies that if they do not want to do the right thing, we have an army of lawyers and academics and now elected officials, national civil rights organizations, Color of Change, Equal Justice Initiative with Brian Stevenson, Cheryl and Eiffel with the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, Human Rights Watch, Nicole Austin Hillary and their wonderful team. Jerry Johnson is here, who's been working with us for over 2 years. They're with us. Angela Rod, the Congressional Black Caucus has already said they're going to bring me back next week or the next couple of weeks to continue to work on this. Congresswoman Maxine Waters is already committed to having hearings with the banks and the financial institutions. Congressman Hank Johnson out of Georgia has already filed legislation that many members are going to file on or sign on as co-sponsor. This will continue to grow. The city, the county, the chamber, and other defendants, they can continue to fight, but we're going to do like Hal Singer, and I'll close here, and you've probably heard this so many times. I talk about Hal Singer all the time because I think about him all the time. Hal Singer was a very famous musician from Tulsa who actually left the United States of America in the 60s because he was so disgusted with how black people were being treated here in America. Hal Singer was 100 years old. He was blind. He was on hospice. He was suffering and about to die. But he still wanted to be a part of our litigation. Hal died 2.5 weeks before we filed in September. So over the summer, I was communicating with he and his wife, Arlette, and I would always feel like I was bothering them because this guy was in the twilight of his life. He was dying. And I felt like it was like, why should I call and be talking to him about a legal case? And I asked Arlette, and I said to her, hey, I feel like I'm bothering you guys. I'm sorry. And she admonished me. And she said, what are you talking about? Hal will fight and will fight and wants to fight for Greenwood and what happened to his parents. until he dies. And she said, I'm going to send you something. And she sent me a letter that Hal wrote to the legal team that Eric was a part of and I was a part of in 2007. He sent this letter to Professor Charles Ogletree. And he talked about the devastation and the feeling when the Supreme Court would not hear our case. And he talked about the fact that our legislation that was introduced at that time had not moved forward. And he said, I never believed that America will be fair to its black citizens. That's why I left. But he said, despite the fact that we will lose a lot of battles, we must continue to fight for our rights and our dignity. The survivors, the descendants, the black people of Tulsa that suffered the massacre have a right to reparations. They have a right to respect. We have a right to restitution. We have a right to repair. And we have a right to move forward with this lawsuit because the black man has rights that everyone must respect. And we have a right to dignity. Justice for Greenwood. Justice for Greenwood. Justice for Greenwood. Thank you. We'll take one or two questions, but we have to be out of here by 10:30.
Can you talk about what the meeting between the survivors and the president was like and what the president's reaction was? You said you told him we need reparations.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The survivors are very clear. They were very clear that they wanted to see reparations, they wanted to see justice. And what I'm so glad that the world got to see our survivors. Because for so long, people thought these were just some decrepit, old people that we were just willing out, we were just telling them what to say. But as the world saw, these were fully functional human beings who were able to articulate for themselves how they felt. And they want to see Greenwood returned to what they remembered and what it should have been. And they told the president, we need policies specifically for Greenwood and black people. Not small businesses, not disadvantaged businesses, not people of color, not black and brown communities, black people in Tulsa who have suffered and black people who have suffered throughout this nation. So that's what they said to the president. And the president said, hey, I understand. And he said, I'm going to do everything in my power to get the equity that we need. And so we want to hold him to that. We appreciate him coming down. He's a wonderful person to talk to. He's very personable. But at the end of the day, we need specific policies that restores the wealth that was stolen from this community. These numbers of this report, and I ask everyone, go to justiceforgreenwood.org. We will have that report up later today. The Color of Wealth by Dr. Derek Hamilton, Kate Ritchie, another member of my team, and myself. It is astonishing, the wealth disparities here. It is astonishing. And what was great, even for the president, and he didn't say this to me, but he had to see it, to come to Tulsa and actually see that south of this highway is a fully functional, modern city, and north of this highway, and I hate to say it because this is my community, it is a third world country. It is a food desert, it is a health desert, it is an education desert, it is a police terror zone. And so those are the things that we hope to have happen. We also talked to the president's staff about the Department of Justice opening an investigation into the murder of Terrence Crutcher.
Yes.
Obviously, the president said, hey, the DOJ is independent, but there is a new administration. And so we're going to take full advantage of reaching out to Attorney General Merrick Garland because we need wholesale, comprehensive change here in Tulsa. We need what we're calling a Greenwood plan. When Europe was bombed back to the medieval times during World War II, the United States put together a Marshall Plan and pumped billions of dollars to revive the entire economic, cultural, social fabric of Europe. Greenwood was bombed. We need a Greenwood plan that revives our economic, cultural, and social fabric of Greenwood.
have a question.
Yes.
Yesterday, Mayor Bynum announced that Tulsa City Council plans to look at the recommendations from the 2001 Race Riot Commission report. And I know that one of those recommendations was reparations. Does that give you any hope that the city of Tulsa is getting closer to making payments to the survivors and their families?
Well, first of all, the mayor is one of the loudest and strongest opponents to reparations. So he made that very clear. So anything that the mayor is supporting, we know is fraudulent. Anything the mayor is supporting, we know it's not really moving us forward towards actual reparations, because he stated right after he said that, I don't believe in cash payments. I don't believe in direct reparations. And so we don't support anything that doesn't say reparations now are due. We don't need any more commissions. We don't need any more reports. The report that was done in 2001 that came after all these people you see on the wall, they all stated, we believe in this report. All the descendants from the Greenwood diaspora that came across the world this weekend, they all said we need reparations. We want those 4 points implemented, which simply are direct reparations to the survivors, where we have 3 left. Reparations to the descendants, a scholarship program for the descendants, and a proper memorial for those who were killed. None of that has happened, and we want to have that happen.
Can you talk about exactly what sort of discovery and what sort of witnesses you're hoping to get? I mean, are you talking about deposing G.T. Bynum and Kevin Stitt?
Absolutely. Michael, you want to take that?
Absolutely. I mean, they are the city and the acting authorities for those entities. Absolutely. We anticipate getting discovery from the institutions themselves, deep discovery, and absolutely, Randall went through the number of depositions you have in these types of cases. There are a whole lot of people who will be sitting down for depositions.
Mike, you mentioned there were 8 defendants and 7 motions to dismiss. Do we know which one hasn't filed a motion to dismiss and why?
There were 8 defendants, but one of them joined another motion, so they all moved to dismiss, to be clear, but they just didn't all file separate motions.
I do want to say one other thing about that, as far as experts. We have already been in contact with medical experts, insurance experts, emotional trauma experts, transportation experts, infrastructure experts, psychologists, psychiatrists, legal experts, or policing experts. So the great thing of having such a powerful team and national folks behind us, we have the resources to engage with some of the very best experts in their field across a wide range of disciplines, because the nuisance cuts across every aspect of life here in Greenwood. And that's why our case is so important. That's why we're not asking for a particular dollar amount. We're asking for the opportunity to prove to the world exactly what it will take to have a comprehensive solution to what we're dealing with here in Tulsa.
Can I just?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that, because we've talked about the type of experts we would put on in this case, and I don't want to get into specific names, but they are leading academics, historians, etc. This tragedy, these murders, what happened here, the impact it's had even today, we can prove all that. We need our chance to prove all that, and that's why we have put so many resources into opposing this motion to dismiss, and why it's so critical that we can go forward. But we have talked a lot about the next steps. We can't wait to get into the next steps, and it's, again, one of the benefits of so much focus being on Tulsa right now. We get incoming calls from top people in the country who are stepping up and want to help show the world what happened here, and not just 100 years ago. The effects have continued through policies, procedures, actions, building that highway right through town, redlining, denying insurance claims, not letting people rebuild through the banks. There are incredibly detailed studies that document that the effects from 1921, actions taken since that time, continue to this day. So one of the things we are really looking forward to is getting our chance to put that on display in front of the world.
Yes, Emory.
How will you address your complaint against the Centennial Commission and Greenwood Rising?
I don't know if I understand your question.
Well, think that money should rightfully belong to the descendants. Is there going to be an actual legal action against them to somehow recoup that or take some action?
Sure. At this time, they're not defendants, and we're just focused on, in this case, the defendants that we have. I'm sorry, is that me? That's Ms. Francis saying we got to get out of here.
Yeah.
So I think that's we conclude. Oh, but just to conclude, just to be clear, they're not defendants in this case. They're not defendants in this case. So, well, thank you so much. We got to get.